So I'm devoting this video to speak a little more in depth about the idea that you can have two people with the same chart, but manifesting at different levels of consciousness, different experiences. Now you can look at the chart and say, okay, well, if there's someone else with this chart, but they're living a different life, that means astrology is bogus, right? And really what the issue here is we have to take a step back and have a firm agreement for what astrology is, right? If we're trying to determine what it means for two people to have the same chart and why it is that they're living different lives, before we jump to conclusions, we have to sort of start with the premise: what's astrology? What is it when we're looking at a chart? What does a chart represent? And the basic premise that I want to offer is the natal chart, astrology, where everything is in the sky, it reflects life. It reflects the soul's journey. It's not causative of it. It's not influencing us. It symbolizes the intentions for this soul's journey in this lifetime. What's unfolding, what's unraveling, the experiences and the areas of growth that the soul has chosen to experience in this lifetime through this human form. Now, if we think of it as reflecting the soul's journey, we're going to have to read the natal chart not as a specific, okay, this is the kind of body you're going to have, because obviously, like, the chart doesn't tell you your gender, right? You have three people born at the same time. Likely, you're going to have more than just one gender, right? Are they all going to have the same nose? Are they all going to have the same body features? No. Are they all going to have the same parents? No. Okay? So if it's reflecting life, it's going to be saying archetypally, these are the dynamics, these are the specific themes that are manifesting. And the cycles, right? Here are different phases and cycles that are going to be manifesting, but the way it's experienced is going to be different for everyone. So I want to give you a tangible example of this so we can practically see this. I'm going to share my chart and just share a snapshot of the transits. These are today, right? Imagine a baby was born right now. So we're going to look at this as if this was a person's chart. The first thing I want to say is that the natal chart on the first level of interpretation says, where are we coming from in the past? What is the context from the soul's journey prior to this life that's led to the creation of this lifetime? The premise here is that this is just one chapter along a series of chapters, that we don't come out of nowhere, and that our being as consciousness is not limited or defined by just this human identity and body, that we exist beyond that as well, before this and after this. And that really our true self is not these identities and these names and these bodies. Who we are is inherently independent of that. And yet there's a reason for why we come into the time-space reality that we come into. And it's our responsibility to fulfill that reason, to operate within time and space according to its purpose. Right? There's a reason why you're in this body, at this time, in this family. These are all the most perfect templates for your evolutionary growth in this lifetime. So that first point is a chart reflects where you're coming from in the sense of, okay, this is what you've been working on. The way that I frame it is, this is where consciousness has been evolving and what has set the stage for your continued journey in this lifetime. So you look at that, and the first thing you can do is you can get a general sense of it, okay? So let's look at this. You have the South Node in Capricorn in the 11th house. Now, the South Node in general corresponds to the past. These are the memories that the soul carries of what it's been like to be here. They're not usually a conscious memory. Some souls will have a memory. Most of us, it's just a sense of identity. We come out of the womb, and it's almost irregardless of our conditioning, of our nurturing. We have a context within ourselves emotionally that is resonant with who we've been and where we're coming from, which says something about why you can have parents raising their children in exactly the same way. But we all come out with our own conditioning that has nothing to do with current life circumstances, right? So you have this right here, Capricorn, South Node in the 11th house. That's a very broad statement. If I were to interpret that right now, it could be many things. It's an archetype. Okay, 11th house is community, groups of people. It's also science. Capricorn is structure, it's form, it's responsibility, right? So this can be a person that has been a political leader in some country and has held many responsibilities serving community. And, Capricorn 11th house can be your political party, right? So, and then Saturn is the ruler of this Capricorn. Every sign has a ruler, so Saturn rules Capricorn. And it's right there with Pluto. So we can say, okay, this is a soul that in the past had a lot of authority and power, Saturn, Pluto, and it's a balsamic conjunction. Saturn's moving towards Pluto. So there's something here around the dissolving of the power and authority they've had in these past lifetimes. So here's one random picture. A soul in a past lifetime was a political leader in the United States, and they had a lot of power, but they manipulated and used their power by learning how to direct funds and resources, Pluto, in a way that is serving their particular political party, and manipulated democratic elections to support their own personal agendas. Okay. Now, we can go on and on and on in the chart and add more pieces. We have Chiron in the 2nd house, and that speaks here around wounding around money and resources and perhaps misusing it. Okay, that's just one story. Let me give you a completely different story. Completely different story. Here's a soul that has been born into a very large family, Capricorn 11th house, and they felt like an outsider. They were born into heteronormative community, and they realized that they were gay, and this was in the 1950s, and they were persecuted for that, and they were outcast. 11th house is outcast by their community and disowned. Capricorn 11th house can be your family disowning you. Now we look into this lifetime for both of those souls. For the political one, this Saturn Pluto means they might be at a juncture right now relative to having had so much power in the past where they're dissolving their power, and they might become aware of disempowered communities. They might be born into an underprivileged community where they're not getting resources, where they're a minority, where they're not being supported by the mainstream government, right? And they'll have to develop more humility and appreciation and awareness of how to use power and authority in a good way. And they might have this experience of having no power, right? Or they might come from an upper class society, but they'll have experiences early on in this lifetime that will radicalize them and help them become aware of, the way corruption hurts. Perhaps they were corrupted or misused or hurt in some way by someone older than them, Capricorn, in their own family, like a cousin or an uncle that violated them. So let's look at the other example of a soul that was sort of outcast from their community. They come into this lifetime, and maybe now they're born into a similar family, right? They're not really accepted, they're not really included. But early on, they determine that they're not going to let themselves be victimized or judged by anyone, and they're going to find community and people that are just like them. And this person will become a leader and become a safe space and create a structure, maybe even get involved in politics to create legislation and more structure in society to support those that are not fitting into the mainstream, those with different sexual or gender identities and other things like that. So you can see that both souls are kind of working in the same themes, right? Like we're not like randomly picking some theme and being like, this is your life. Like the archetypes are the same for each person. But you have to understand, this is the main point that I want to bring home for everyone, is depending on your level of consciousness and the way in which, according to your own nature, your path of unraveling and growth is most suited for you, you're going to come into completely different experiences. If it's relevant to be born in Saudi Arabia as a woman, then you will. If it's relevant for you to be born in the United States as a rich, privileged Catholic from a very heteronormative community, then you will. Okay? The chart doesn't say that. And the chart doesn't say where you're coming from and where you're going just by looking at it alone. The ingredient that we need, what you need to include there, is you have to connect with the person themselves. You have to connect with the soul reality. So if someone comes up to me and they're gay and they say that they were outcast by their family and their community and they were rejected, and they want to help other people who were excluded and excommunicated to feel more included, and they want to get involved in politics, I see that and I look at their chart and I have a context, right? The chart reflects their soul's reality. So that chart says, okay, I thank you for sharing that with me. It's good to feel you and the questions you're coming with and just the energy of your being. We can feel people's energy. Now that I have that, now that I sense you, I can look to the chart and the chart will help me to see what your evolutionary intention is, right? If someone's coming up to me and they're saying, I was excommunicated by my family because of my sexual identity, and I see a Pluto-Saturn conjunction in Capricorn on the 11th house conjunct the South Node, it's like no astrologer would argue with that. It's like, okay, got it. That's a part of your evolutionary growth, which is liberating from the need to belong, finding your own power within, and you might be revolutionizing or starting your own community. Right? There's a very clear directive there, and the Saturn-Pluto balsamic means you're completing a cycle. South Node means these are dynamics that have been manifesting before this lifetime that you are resolving and completing. And then you look at the whole chart, you get really detailed. Now, the point of reading a chart is not to tell a person about their past lives. It's quite irrelevant, has no inherent meaning. What's useful is to be able to look at the chart and understand what is the intention. Right? In your life experiences, what's the growth? What wants to unravel? What wants to unfold for you? This other person comes to me, and the one who in a past life was manipulative. And let's say they come to me and they say, they're a part of this community of people, and maybe in this case they're still trying to hold on to that power. Right? They come to me and they're like, I really want to make sure that my political party wins in the next election. What am I going to say to them? Well, Saturn, Pluto, balsamic, you're completing that cycle of power. So you're going to have to actually let go of that. And if you don't let go of that, it's going to create more challenging circumstances for you. You're going to be fighting and using force and manipulation. And because I understand Pluto and because I understand Saturn, I know what that's like. I know those energies aren't about becoming manipulative and controlling. It's about finding power within, which often means experiencing loss. Like, you might lose the elections, but be ethical, right? I'd want to guide that person towards ethics, doing what's right, help them to unravel that. So same thing, you could have twins with the same chart. Very often when twins come with the same chart, it's very, very often the case that one soul is at a higher evolutionary stage than the other. When I speak about higher evolutionary stage, what I'm simply referring to is the idea that we're all where we need to be. We're all growing, we're all evolving, and that there are phases that we go through, right? And so in lower stages of evolution, the journey has more to do with the density of time and space, right? Consciousness is really identified with fitting in, right? So they're going to be operating within that realm. But as a soul evolves, their sense of self is less linked with those factors. So like the soul that was political, they're in a lower evolutionary stage than the soul that's more radicalized and wants to support people of different minority groups or gender or sexual identities. That means the political one that wanted to support their party, their consciousness is fixed more towards, I know who I am according to my belonging and my identification with my group. Whereas the other soul, I know who I am because I'm validating and acknowledging who I am, even if it means I'm different. And I'm going to find other people that resonate with me in that way. But I'm going to start with acknowledging I'm different, right? This first soul is going to want to be normal. They're going to want to fit into the normal world and whatever their religion, their party, whatever they're grown up believing. So we have souls at different stages of consciousness, and you can't see that in the chart. You have to observe it and interpret the chart appropriately. So oftentimes twins is that example where one soul might be at a different stage than the other, and they're actually often helping each other out. Otherwise, we just have to understand that every soul has their own journey. This soul found it relevant to be born as a twin to this family at this time. And this soul found it relevant, according to their evolutionary need, to be born as a twin to this family at this time in this body. Whether they're both the same gender or not, the point is, use the soul as the reference point. So we ask the question, as a soul, why did you choose the totality of the circumstances that you came into? How is this relevant to your soul's evolutionary growth? Right? We ask that question when we look at the chart. We observe what they're interested in, the nature of their consciousness. That helps us understand what they're working with. Are they evolving through the paradigm of fitting in, or maybe evolving out of being accepted by mainstream society, right? Are they in a more of a sort of universal spiritualized state where they're interested in spiritual awakening, in realizing their timeless self and unifying with life? We have to feel that, and then we interpret the chart accordingly. So astrology reflects life. It's a language that reflects the oneness of reality. And there's a deep, don't ask me how this stuff works, it's just what I notice works. So the stars right now, the transits right now in the sky, are one with what's happening right now, right? This is what's unfolding. This is the moment. These are the cycles, and it's like the mind of God. This is what's unfolding within creation. And we're all going to experience that according to our own unique nature, according to our own individuality. One last point, every soul is its own individual. As it is created, there is no duplications of a soul. Every soul, and souls can split themselves and manifest different places at the same time. There's that. But the essence of everything in creation is purely what it is. And in totality, everything in the universe reflects the one community, which is God's mind, the consciousness of Creator. And according to the individuality of the soul, our own nature, our path towards remembering, our path of realization is also going to be uniquely tailored and relevant to our own individuality. So that's another piece to consider that relates to what I've been saying. We all have our own individuality, which means when I wake up, it's going to look different than when you wake up. When I realize that I am of the oneness, that I am the oneness manifesting through this form, and you have that same realization, we're still going to look differently. We're still going to act differently. We're going to have different ways of being. That's true for all of us. And the realization is an ongoing journey. As this unfolds, the nature of that unfolding is specific to the nature of our own original self. And the natal chart doesn't say what your original self is. It just says what's the unfolding of that path. But we have to really have a respect for the fact that each one of us as a soul being is completely individual, completely unique in our essence, and that our journeys will manifest and unfold according to that.